Tell you where to stop at.
Starting your conference.
The first slide.
Yeah.
Let me keep going back. Down more? Hang on. Make up. Okay, let me get back here. Here's the first slide. Keep going.
A lot of these data are very public in the United States, public. Balance sheet of Delaware, etc. A lot of offices are working with expensive, strong team in this issue, this concern. Nationwide. What is the reason nobody take the red flag and warning nationwide what is happening? Because this kind of lowest value, highest national debt.
Why did somebody not say? Why did somebody not do something?
No Greenspan, nobody.
Let me tell you here's my suspicion. My suspicion. And I'm not picking on President Bush by any means. President Bush was in his last term. It happened during his watch. Okay, and I'm not saying I think President Bush. I think he had a good heart. I think he had some bad advice. And I think it got to the point he was complacent and he was on his way out. And I think, he really probably did not take action as he should have. I think he probably just avoided the issue. I really think that happened. I think he had some advisors that did not do a really good job. Greenspan, he's made some really crazy comments lately too. That just didn't make sense. I don't know how competent he was at the end. I think Bernanke's going to do a lot better job. So I think to answer your question is, I think it probably was President Bush's last couple of years in office, and I think he was just looking at getting out. I think he was complacent. I think his advisors, Greenspan, etc., I don't know if they just didn't do their job. I think they become complacent. That's just my guess.
Do you think they were thinking about the different offices, not Greenspan or
well, look at the Treasury Department.
We're talking about private office that has a lot of customers on the world. Nobody said we are very, very close to the team.
Yeah. Well, you know who.
Nobody, like a blind person, everybody.
You know who should have been saying this? The FDIC should have been catching the banking problem. Hey, listen, I was a controller at a bank. I did audits. I could tell you how the bank's doing, folks. The FDIC auditors are sharp. I work with them every year. But they said nothing. Why did they not say nothing? That concerns me. Look at Madoff. Bernie Madoff was just convicted today. Why did the SEC not catch that? They have sharp auditors. They didn't catch it. Why did the FDIC? Why did the comptroller of the currency? Why did our state bank departments? We're audited 4 times at least every year and a half in a bank. You're audited at least 4 times. Why did someone not, as you said, raise a red flag and say, we've got some problems here. The quality of the loans are not looking good. Because we had a compliance officer that would come by every 16 months, within a 16-month period, and they would look at loans. And folks, if the quality wasn't good, you got hammered. Why did it not happen? I can't answer that question, but there's a breakdown in the system.
I would say that there is a fine line between the global market, Wall Street, and the bank. There was no rule for investment from the bank that they went to the market and do investment on a high interest rate like you was talking before, and that one crashed because they were selling loans to a market of loans, which is on the free market. So actually, it was bank doing investment.
And derivatives got us in trouble, selling large groups of these. So I think a lot of it was just. I think we'll have more oversight in the future.
Do you think the major banks, need to be nationalized completely, so they can be restructured and then?
I think that may be what will have to happen. I think there's so many poisonous assets out there. I think they're going to have to. I think it may have to be nationalized. The major banks. Now, the regional banks are still doing okay. Arvest is doing fine, but nationalizing perhaps the major banks for a year or two, getting them back on their feet, and then going back toward regulation, getting the FDIC very involved, the Department of the Treasury involved, may be what we'll have to do to get them out. Because even though we had a couple good months for Bank of America and Citibank, how's the 3rd and 4th and 5th month going to look? We don't know.
So, the presentation you was telling us before that you need to figure out from more than 80 times.
Yep.
You could see this happening in Nicaragua 5 years ago. And it's exactly what happened in the U.S. On a very small scale, but it was the same.
There are other examples in the last 25 years around the world of financial crises in different countries. this is probably the most globalized one because of the integration of the market, but Japan went through a housing bubble and through a banking crisis, and Sweden. From what I understand, it took Japan 8 years to create what they call a toxic bank, where they took these toxic assets out of the balance sheets and allowed the bank, with their own cash flows, to begin to grow again. In this case, the federal government has chosen to inject money directly into the banks, and what has happened is that taxpayer money has completely evaporated because it's been traded on the stock markets. So not only do they still have the toxic assets, they also lost taxpayer money.
And they also acquired additional banks that were failing to have additional toxic assets.
So why does the United States, instead of nationalizing the bank, buy the toxic assets outright and make a toxic bank?
There's a lot of discussion about that, and I think something has to happen. You know, what's interesting to me, though, and it kind of goes back to what the federal government's doing, you know, we just passed the biggest stimulus package in history, and you know, none of the congressmen ever read the bill. All right, I'm going to give each of you a contract. I'm going to tell you to sign it, but you can't read it. Well, nobody would sign a contract you haven't read. That's what we did. So I think sometimes a lot of it's our congressional problems. You know, why do we just throw money at a problem? Why do we back up and say, now, what can we do to solve the problem? You know, let's make sure that there are strict regulations on what banks can do with the money. Not go out and buy additional banks that are failing, additional toxic assets, but that's what happened. That may be what we'll have to do is basically have a bank where we pull all the toxic assets in, evaluate them, and then go from there. I mean, something's going to have to happen.
If they keep putting money into publicly traded banks, the money just goes away. It disappears. If you put the money,
It does.
If you put the money into a ginormous toxic bank, somebody's going to eventually say, you know what? Even if it's 2 cents, I'll pay 2 cents on the dollar. But at least the taxpayer money was somewhat preserved.
They need a Senate.
Well, I mean, I'll be honest. I mean, it's you know, I think a lot of the problem is trying to get, you know, our political system, I think, is somewhat broken. I think you guys know that. You know, the Congress and the Senate can never agree, and we're still so much. If you're a Republican or a Democrat, they can't work together, and I think that's a big part of the problem. I know our President Obama is trying, but folks, he's got a lot on his plate. I don't know why anybody would want that job right now. I mean, they're crazy. I mean, you think about what he's got on his plate, and trying to get the Democrats and Republicans to agree on anything is almost impossible. I think you're right. I mean, you know, we're throwing good money after bad, and we just keep putting money. They're talking about another stimulus package right now. They don't even know if this one worked. Folks, think about where our national debt will be at in the next couple of years if we keep going. What will be the value of our dollars? It'll be worthless. I'll tell you one business you might want to be in if you're in the United States, though. If you were in the ink business, as much money as we're printing, you'd make some money because they're using a lot of ink to print money. That would be the only thing I could tell you that you might make money at in the States now because they just keep printing it. It's a major concern. You know, how will we handle this? I don't know. You wonder sometimes what kind of advice is Obama getting? You know, you have to question that.
Can I ask you a question? For many, many years, the largest investor in the United States was an Asian country that had very high savings and were exporting that money to the United States. There was a huge amount of liquidity in the U.S. system, and it had to get placed somehow. This is where it got placed. At what point, you know, do even foreign governments, I mean, before the United States, Citibank was basically nationalized by Dubai's investment fund. That was the largest investor before it was the United States government. What have you heard of these kinds of relationships? I mean, the Chinese have more dollars in their reserves than any other nation in the world. When do these things start spilling over where other countries suddenly start saying, you know, I'm going to sell eventually America?
Well, Hillary Clinton, our Secretary of State, was just in China, and what did the Chinese government tell her? Basically, we're not willing to buy any more of your assets at this time. What's China going through right now? They're working on a stimulus package. They're having trouble. They say, we don't want to buy any more of your T-bills, your T-notes. And remember, we're financing this through T-bills and T-notes. I think companies now are saying, let me give you an example. I had a chance to talk to the superintendent of banking in Guatemala. I spent about a half a day with both he and his staff, and we talked about these things. About 6 months before this happened, guess what they did? They got rid of all their U.S. investments. They had a lot of T-bills, T-notes. They had some Ginnie Maes and Fannie Mae. They got rid of all of them. And